for a conversation around the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map. This is a makeup session that focuses on a couple of geographies. Ren, you might have to help me, but a couple of geographies, Uptown. Go ahead.
Uptown, West Inner, North Inner, Northeast Inner, and East Inner. And I can put the link to the map of those if anyone wants me to.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Alicia Osborne. I'm with the City of Charlotte Planning and Development, Design and Development Department. I'm the Division Manager for Long Range and Strategic Planning. I also have a number of other City of Charlotte staff. We have Ren Hess, who is our intern from UNC Chapel Hill, Kathy Cornett, Gretchen Flores, and Tracy Newsom, who are also with the City of Charlotte. So the way we've been kind of conducting these meetings is one, it's for participants that are new to the project, but also those who have targeted questions. And so Mr. Will Wire or Weir, if you want to express whether you've been a participant or not, that will be helpful and guide how we proceed with the discussion tonight.
Hi, I'm just I'm a resident in the West Inner region and missed the first meeting and just wanted to see what this was all about.
Okay. So you're not familiar with the map process at all? Haven't seen anything? You're just interested? Okay. So we'll pull up and run through a few slides. So if you don't mind me asking, which neighborhood do you live in?
It's Westerly Hills. So it's
what's the major? Go ahead.
Ashley Road, near the back behind that Wilkinson Walmart.
Okay.
Yeah, Harding High School.
Okay, now I know where you're talking about, behind the Walmart off of Wilkinson. So that would be West Inner.
West Inner. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Ren, can you pull that up for us? Because I have I think I pulled up the same one twice. Just give us a few seconds. We'll pull up some slides and walk through them. Is it up, Ryan?
I just messaged Gretchen. I'm on my personal computer instead of my work computer, so I don't actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
no worries.
I've got it.
Sorry about that.
Hang on 1 second.
Thanks, Gretchen.
Yep.
It's fine. Because I was gonna pull it up, but then that's a whole nother mess. I just got one screen. All right. So we can jump straight to so tonight we'll just share real briefly about the purpose of the 2040 map and the Charlotte Streets map, how those maps work together, and then walk through the 2040 map recommendations and the mapping approach and some adjustments that we might make to the map. Next slide. So there are 2 draft maps and a process that has come out of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan that Council adopted in June of this year. And the projects on the bottom of the screen are key implementation. So it's putting the comprehensive plan into action. So they focus on land use, mobility, and development. So the 2040 policy map is the land use portion. The complement to that is mobility, the strategic mobility plan and the streets maps, which really focuses on how we move and get to and from those land uses. And then the Unified Development Ordinance, or the UDO, is the rules in which all all development have to comply with to make sure we realize the vision for the plan. Next slide. So how do these two maps relate to each other? They both provide guidance on the built environment. The policy map focuses on the land use and form, and the mobility portion, which is the streets map, talk about what types of streets and sidewalks and other facilities, transit lines or bus facilities, how we move about amongst within the built environment. Next slide. So what are the two draft maps? Next slide. So what makes a street? When we talk about streets, this illustration shows kind of the key elements. It breaks it down as to how all the pieces fit together. Think of it as a puzzle. So A is the center space. That's where you would see your median or turn lanes, and oftentimes serve as a pedestrian refuge. B is the travel lanes. That's where motorized vehicles go, including where scooters, and I've seen these motorized skateboards these days, but that's where the motorized vehicles go in our travel lanes. And then you might have seen our community has grown in terms of the number of bicycle facilities that we have. And that's always an element we seek to include in all our street. And then you have behind the bike lane up into the building, you have the curb and gutter. Sometimes that's where parking is. The amenity zone, which sometimes is planting strips, where you find trees or planters to serve as a buffer and provide green space between the sidewalk and the actual travel lanes. Next slide. So what is the Charlotte Streets Map? It's a map vision for Charlotte's future multimodal network. And what we mean by multimodal is just the various modes of transportation within our community. And one of those key implementation tools for that streets map is the Unified Development Ordinance. So that's how the streets map relates to the actual development regulations to make sure that we are providing the same types of facilities throughout our community. And it shows the cross sections for all of the streets types. So street classifications, the number of lanes, bike facilities, all those dimensions, and how we achieve kind of a broad or comprehensive transportation system are included in the streets map. Next slide. So there is an online application for that particular map that you can provide a comment in the box. It's interactive, so you can zoom in, zoom out, put your address in, and then see what the recommendation is for your street, and then provide your comments. Do you agree with the recommendation? If not, then why? But this is a really kind of neat tool that makes it more interactive and accessible for folks to learn more about what the streets map is and how to provide comments. Next slide. So what is the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map? As I mentioned before, it's a key implementation item for the comp plan. And what it essentially does is take translation of place-based policies to specific geographies. It provides that citywide direction for balancing future needs and opportunities while providing opportunity for growth, how we might provide infrastructure to accommodate that growth, and improves access to underserved or disenfranchised areas within our community. Next slide. So the map was actually developed in 3 steps, and our engagement mirrored those 3 steps as well. So we mapped existing development. That's what's on the ground today. what would that look like using the place type tool? Then the next step was mapping adopted policy. There is currently adopted policy that council and the community uses that speaks to how we want to grow over time. So how would that map or those set of policies be translated to place types? That was the second step. And then a series of inputs, market study, zoning, the adopted future, the adopted policy map, and some feedback through the comp plan helped to shape the 2040 policy map. And it shows more than just what land uses are appropriate in our community. It talks about mix and proportions of land use, building form and character and design, how you move in these amongst these different land uses, and also speaks to open space. Next slide. Next slide. So here's the 10 place types, the tools that we're using to build the policy map. They were adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. So we're not rethinking what the tool is, but in this step of implementation, we're looking to apply that. And they can be kind of categorized into 3 different sets of place types: live, work, and play. And so the neighborhood 1, 2 neighborhood centers and parks and preserve is primarily where you find residential as a primary use. And it goes from lease intents from the neighborhood 1 to the neighborhood center, where you might find more of a mixture of uses. And then you move toward the community activity center, commercial, and campus. And that's where you have true mixed use of residential, commercial, and possibly institutional uses. The campus is geared more toward these large areas where we have a campus type of setting, not just a school, but also hospitals or office parks, like the Wells Fargo Center near University Research Park. Those types of things are similar to a campus. And then you move to the group of place types that are where our major employment centers are, or the areas that generate the most jobs. And so that's our innovation, mixed use, manufacturing, logistics, and our regional activity center. An example of a regional activity center would be Uptown or South Park or Ballantyne, where you have really intense development that provides major employment centers as well as entertainment and other activities. And then the manufacturing and innovation mixed use are more where you find some industrial uses that has jobs and or old industrial uses that are transitioning to more of a mixture of uses similar to what's happening at Camp North End or Savannah Mill. Next slide. So I mentioned the 3 steps, the 3-step process, and this is the inputs for that. The first map or the first step was existing development, which was only just a reference, a starting point, and education to the community about the place type as a tool. Then that next step was looking at the adopted policies, which were the future land use zoning, and then some market support to see where the market would support certain uses in the future. And then a policy map, these are the inputs that were used to come up with that map, included growth projections, infrastructure, environmental capacity, and market feasibility. There's a survey in the first part of this process, and then also plan policies and the equitable growth framework, which really speaks to putting metrics to identify our areas of greatest need in the community in terms of housing, jobs, and environmental justice. Next slide. So this is the West Inner geography. It's essentially bounded by 85, Billy Graham Parkway, 77, a little bit of 277. And some of the major landmarks are the new Lynx Gold Line, the streetcar, Wilkerson Boulevard as one, and Tuckasegee and West Boulevard, some of the major corridors. It's also you see where the dots are, home to the location for the extension of the Silver Line or the next links line that goes from Independence out to the airport. And so this is the geography that I think near Wilkerson is where you live, Will. Next slide. All right. So we talked about the 3 steps in the map, and this is the first map, Will, for your area. It essentially just shows what's on the ground today and what that place type map might look like. What's important to point out for this map is where you see neighborhood 1, which is preservation of the neighborhoods, and then along Wilkinson and Beatty's Ford, you see the nodal development in anticipation for the new transit lines or the existing transit lines. And then on the other corridors, you also see some commercial as well. Next slide. So this slide shows a difference from the first map to the adopted policy map. And what's important to note is that how in the future, the direction in which the city is going is still to preserve its neighborhoods and future growth. So you see an increase in neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2, but you see some differences in the non-residential place types like parks and preserve, commercial, campus, and manufacturing logistics. And those changes are simply a difference in how the zoning was translated from one map to the other, and how we kind of coded parks and preserves in terms of who owns the land and versus what the adopted policy said it should be. So you'll see a difference in the next map. Next slide. So here you go. So this is the 2040 policy map generally for the West Inner area. Just pointing out some of the key areas and changes. So you see around Beatty's Ford and Wilkinson, those are primarily neighborhood center because streetcar has a different along the Silver Line. And then you also see some of the purple where manufacturing logistics are and innovation mixed use. So the numbers there are showing a little bit of difference, but where you see the difference in those numbers going down, you see an increase in concentrating the growth in the areas where the infrastructure could support it. And so that's along the transit lines and the major corridors. But what's important to note is that the neighborhoods will stay intact. There's more parks and preserve that's also being recommended in this area as well. Next slide. Next slide, Grish. Is that it? Oh.
Yeah, this is the equitable growth framework.
Yeah. So these slides are a little more complicated, Will, than some of the other ones, but they really just talk about the equitable growth framework, which is a key part of the comp plan that points out and provides guidance on identifying areas of greater need within our community. So this one is measuring what parts of this geography have adequate access to housing, jobs, goods, and services. And so the hash marks show that this area has this area has access to those, right? Am I right about the hash part? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and then so the map to the right is where you have areas or geographies that are impacted by environmental justice issues. And so those are primarily those areas that are close to major transportation facilities and or manufacturing, logistics, or industrial land uses. So the policy map doesn't make a change to that adjacency in terms of environmental justice. What it does is it starts to measure and also identify those areas of vulnerability for that, and puts us on notice as to how we can address that through design, future development, or some type of other plan for mitigation in the future. Next slide. All right, so can we just jump to, so far, Will, I want to pause and just ask if you have any questions about this, about the maps we just showed you before we move on, since it's you, just you.
Yeah. Thank y'all for doing this for just me.
So
But,
we're trying to make it individualized.
yeah, each person in the city. All right, but yeah, I guess I saw, at least for my kind of little section of the west inner area that I'm familiar with, I saw that like Harding is going to become like a neighborhood 2 area, and then Philip O'Berry have it as an industrial area. I know those are the 2 close high schools. Is that, I haven't seen anything about like the new zoning or anything like that for schools, but are they just gonna put more people into fewer schools?
That's a good question. I would say that we have been partnering with, CMS has been a part of this process, and they are aware, as with other departments within the city, of the growth projections. So they know how much the population will grow. And these are all guesses, but good ones in terms of statistics. And then they're planning for their schools to accommodate that growth that we expect in the future. And so this map that's on the screen now shows kind of the growth allocations. Like, we had to really be really intentional about this area or the region is growing. How much of it will we be able to accommodate as a city? And so what we do know is that for this particular area, it will grow by 4,070 households. And so that CMS has this formula that based on this number of households, it will generate X amount of students. And so they're aware of that. And that's how they decide how to build their school. But some schools are coded as campus place type, or they're allowed definitely in neighborhood. They traditionally have been allowed in neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2, and most of the place types except industrial. So we'll double check to make sure for your area. But I do know for sure that we're not taking away any schools, but CMS uses the same numbers that we're using in terms of population projections to plan for newer schools in the future, if that helps.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that was the one question I had.
Yeah, that's a good one. Next slide, Gretchen. So also jobs is something to think about. We talk about upward mobility and economic mobility within the city of Charlotte. And so for this area, it's growing quite a bit. 66, roughly 6,700 jobs are anticipated over the next 20 years for this area. Next slide. All right. So just to kind of put a little bit of context to how we're using your feedback tonight, we'll look at it in two different ways. Are we missing anything in the mapping approach? Is there something that we haven't considered or something that you think is extremely important for us to think about as we produce the map? Are there any additional steps? And then are there adjustments to the approach that we're using or the methodology that could not just only impact your neighborhood, but other neighborhoods like yours throughout the city? And so that's the two buckets of information or feedback we're seeking tonight. Next slide. Okay, so we're gonna skip all this. Can we go to, yes, this
Or
part?
if you want to go to the
And
map.
yeah, just go to the map, Rich.
Oh, we're there.
This one's fine. This one's fine. We'll just take notes on what he said. So Will, here's the map for your area. I showed it earlier. Again, since it's just you, we can make it really personal and answering your questions or any concerns you might have around the area off of Wilkinson or any other part of this map. And we'll
Okay.
just take notes.
Yeah. So let's see. So that area that Philip O'Berry is, I think that's commercial right now. I think I said industrial before, but commercial.
Mm-hmm.
And then Harding, that's neighborhood 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just noticed this, it's like Westerly Hills Park. It's kind of in the center of this neighborhood 1 north of Wilkinson, kind of west of Ashland Road.
Yeah, right in
But
the middle.
Yeah. So it's I know there's a lot of like streams and stuff that go through it, and it floods a lot. So I think that's probably why it's a park right now. And I guess just wanted to double check that it's going to have apartments on it when I don't know, seems like a tough place to build with all the flooding that happens already right there.
Yeah. So there's this map is just one of many tools that developers and the county and the city and residents use in making those types of decisions. There's a whole nother set of regulations, to your point, that provide some protection for those type of environmentally sensitive areas where you can't build a lot because they're flood prone. And so they're likely to flood. So there's a lot of regulations that will help protect that. Residential is the least, I want to say impactful, or is the least of those uses. You wouldn't want to put like manufacturing, but if you were to develop, the least of what you would do is some type of residential, and the development ordinance will say what type is appropriate. But you're right. There's a lot of things that probably shouldn't go there, if anything. But the development ordinance will provide guidance and protection for those environmentally sensitive areas.
Okay. Right. That's all I got.
That's all you got?
That's all I got. I thought it was going to help me out.
Well, we do appreciate your time.
I appreciate y'all's.
Yeah, we also have the chair woman for the Charlotte Mecklenburg Planning Commission on the call, Ms. Kiva Samuel. Thank you for coming, Commissioner Samuel.
Good evening. Thank you for, wow, 30, what is this, 36?
Yep,
35?
36.
36 times.
Yeah.
After a while, you're not going to need the slideshow. You guys have been awesome through this whole process.
I think we all
And,
know it by heart.
Will gets the one-on-one. He gets all the attention.
Yeah, he does.
Right.
He got lucky. That's all right. So we'll, for next steps, we will continue to meet. We have the online comment application. I think the link is in the chat, or you can just go to the site address that's provided on the screen. We have hard copies in the libraries and YMCA's, but if you visit our website, all the list of those are available for you. And then we'll take that feedback to produce a second draft of the map and have it ready early 2022 for review. So if you don't have any more questions, we do want to thank you for your time and joining us.
Yeah, I'm all out of questions. Sorry, I only had a few, but thank you all so much for doing this too. I appreciate
All
it.
right, absolutely. Have a good evening.
All right, y'all too.
You too.